So, good morning, you guys. I want to review AEW Dynamite from last night. And I do want to mention that I was very, very pissed off with AEW because, Double or Nothing is coming up in, just like 2 weeks. This is actually one of their big four pay per views. This is almost like their SummerSlam. But, we don't know what matches are going to be announced. We only have two of them. And ultimately, there is like a lot of talk that they may cancel Anarchy in the Arena and they may actually have AEW Blood and Guts instead, really. Well, either one's going to be something to look forward to, but the way the tradition goes is it's supposed to be Anarchy in the Arena for Double or Nothing, and then they're supposed to do Blood and Guts, really. So it's not good if they just do whatever they want, really. So as I dissect this card, that was kind of like the biggest, glowingest issue of this entire show. But otherwise, it was something that was really digestible, and I really enjoyed the show. So it opens with Adam Page, and he's saying that he's putting his feelings about Swerve Strickland behind him. Like, he doesn't forgive Swerve, but he's more focused on the world title. So this is actually really good because if you ever see like a conflict of Swerve Strickland going after the world title or whatever, you know that Adam Page, based on what he's saying, if you trust what he's saying, is not going to go after him. So I'm kind of like how they're burying. Well, this is a way of him burying the hatchet, really, because you can't always go back to Swerve and Adam Page, because eventually it becomes like Randy Orton, John Cena, where you do it way too many times. So Will Ospreay comes out and they actually talk a little bit. They actually have a dynamic with each other. So Ospreay talks about how, he does a lot for the company. He talks to the kids. He does all these like well wishes from the company and other things like that. Really. And then he says something like he respects that Adam Page is going through redemption and a lot of feelings, but no, he said it's the redemption versus the ascension, and that's actually really like cool, like wordplay and other word usage and other things like that. So I like that. And then also too, like Osprey is a really hot character, and so is Adam Page. So obviously you want to start the show hot by having two people who are charismatic. They bring a lot of energy and everything like that, really. And that's kind of what AEW needs to be doing. You don't start a match with like two wrestlers you don't know about, like Emi Sakura versus Mercedes Moné. You got to have like a segment with like the best of the best, really, to kind of give vitality in the beginning of the show. So that was a really great choice. I give them credit for that, really. And then they have the Don Callis family come out. So it's revealed that it's going to be two members of the Don Callis family versus Adam Page and Will Ospreay. And they kind of really tease that Adam Page and Will Ospreay are not on the same page. So next week's going to be Josh Alexander and Konosuke Takashita versus Adam Page and Ospreay. So, that's definitely a good matchup because we never see, because I don't think they did Takeshita versus Adam Page. And then also you've not seen Josh Alexander versus both of them in AEW. I believe that Josh Alexander and Ospreay have had matches before. So definitely it's gonna be really good. Hangman did beat Josh Alexander. So it's gonna be a really cool match, but it's gonna be interesting to see the dynamics and what goes into AEW. What goes into AEW Double or Nothing. So the next match was the Fatal 4-Way between Penelope Ford, Toni Storm, Thunder Rosa, and Anna Jay. And they did a segment with Harley Cameron beforehand, and I believe it was with Anna Jay, and they kind of made some like sexual jokes, really. So they have to be like a little careful of that because they make a lot of sexual jokes in AEW with the women, and it becomes just a little repetitive, really. So they just have to be a little careful because women being sex positive, if you do these jokes all the time, really, it becomes just like the Conway Twitty gag. And I'm kind of getting that feeling with AEW that a lot of these like sexualized jokes feel like the Conway Twitty gag, where it's just a little like overdone. And the match was all right. There was a lot of dives. I've actually heard other people review the match, and I do agree that Penelope Ford botched a couple of things. She didn't set some things up right. And then there are also some spots where they're kind of like having Toni Storm. I believe like you had somebody in between her crotch, and then you had Toni Storm's face and somebody else's crotch. So again, we're kind of seeing what we see with Toni Storm, where she kind of makes a lot of sexualized jokes. And while that's funny, there will be a day where it's like, okay, this is becoming like Conway Twitty, where from Family Guy, the Family Guy gag of showing Conway Twitty music videos, where it just becomes a little too repetitive. So they have to be careful that it doesn't become repetitive, and when it's just, Not good. In this match, Tony Storm wins. I'm not happy with that. Imagine if you had Thunder Rosa win, and then you do a match between, like, friend versus friend at AEW Double or Nothing. And this is kind of what I see with AEW, is that they're not that good about saying, hey, we even have something here that we can tie into a match. Another thing that happens is that Megan Bayne comes down, and I'm happy that the announcers explain she's allowed to do whatever she wants because this is a no DQ match. So Megan Bayne, does a power bomb on Anna Jay, and then what happens is that Harley Cameron comes down and attacks Megan Bayne with a pipe, really. So you could set up a match between Harley Cameron and Megan Bayne, like a street fight type of match at AEW Double or Nothing. People would love to see that, really, because people like Harley Cameron. That would be a match that you'd want to see. Or you can even do Anna Jay versus Megan Bayne in a street fight, because a lot of people like, Anna Jay as well, really. So you kind of see what I'm trying to tell you, that it's so easy for them to create matches for the pay-per-view, but they're not doing that. Again, we have 2 matches, and we don't know what the main event's going to be. I was not happy that Tony Storm won, as I said, because, it's predictable. And a lot of times with the champion challenge, where it's like you have to beat the champion twice to get the title, a lot of times the champions win the first win the first time. So it's not something that I look forward to. So like I said, that because Tony Storm and Thunder Rosa are friends. What would happen if you have Thunder Rosa face actually pin Tony Storm, and then they have a match and they talk about how Thunder Rosa really wants to, hold the title at AEW All In. She's had a period of bad luck, really. So she wants to go in as the champion against Mercedes Moné. That would be an interesting story. Again, you don't have a lot of matches, so here's something where you could have just done a match, but they decided not to do that with it. And then I also was saying, too, imagine if you did a street fight between Harley Cameron and Megan Bayne at AEW Double or Nothing. And then you had Harley Cameron have a puppet called not the Mega Sis, but the Mega Bitch. You see, that's why I should be booking this show or talking to Tony Storm about some ideas, or he should be watching my reviews and giving me money about some good ideas that I have. So the next thing that happened was the Hurt Syndicate segment. And what happens is that the Hurt Syndicate comes out and saying we're looking for new opponents. And what happened was that Top Flight came out, and so did Crew. So I'm happy because Top Flight came out, and then you had Crew. So it made you think, okay, what's going to happen between Crew and Top Flight? Is Top Flight going to challenge the Hurt Syndicate, and then they get screwed over by the Crew or whatever? So I like that. That kind of dynamic of you don't know where it's going to go. So I like that kind of you don't know if it's going to go one way or the other way. So I appreciate that. The other thing that I was happy about is that MJF comes out and attacks some Top Flight. And just to show Bobby Lashley that, he does hurt people as well, really. And I appreciate that, because Top Flight are not the right people to be facing Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin. You need legitimate opponents like Josh Alexander and Takeshita, or Josh Alexander and, Lance Archer, or Lance Archer and Brian Cage, or Mark Davis and somebody from the Don Callis family would be good, or Vincent and the other guy, the Righteous, would be good opponents for them, because they both are bigger body people, really. So you don't want the Hurt Syndicate having matches with Top Flight or Crew or other groups of smaller people, unless they actually can, lift them, throw them, and whatever, really, because you got to make sure that when Lashley and Shelton compete, it is a match that people want to see, especially because Lashley's such a big star. And you got to also say, hey, he's a big man. You got to make sure he's booked very, very well. You can't do something with Lashley where he's fighting these X Division or cruiserweight size people. And it's also revealed that Bobby Lashley got a smile on his face for seeing what MJF did. And what's going to happen is that next week you're going to see Bobby Lashley give his decision about, if MJF is going to join the Hurt Syndicate. And what I'm hoping for is that you set up MJF versus Bobby Lashley initiation match. And you have MJF win, and then what happens after that is MJF messes up the Hurt Syndicate, and then you have him and Bobby Lashley in a falls count anywhere or lights out match or something like that, really. So that would be the way to do it, just to set up two matches, really. And again, MJF versus Bobby Lashley is a dream match. So I think that's what's going to happen. They have to have a match like that. And the next thing that is that you had Nick Wayne do a ROH TV Championship match, and what happened is Christian is forcing him to defend the title. So I was like saying to myself, this is also bad as well, really, because what would happen, like the pay-per-view that they're having in like Double or Nothing, what would happen if you had you announce Nick Wayne's gonna do an open challenge and you announce it's gonna be RVD versus Nick Wayne? That would be a great match. Or if you did something like Dustin Rhodes or Jeff Jarrett or another like type of veteran and they have like a good like 15-20 minute match, or you can do something like you go as far as get Hologram, or you get like Commander, or you bring a star from CMLL because you're going to do like the show in CMLL in a couple of weeks at Mexico Arena. So that's another thing they could have done, really, was just announce Nick Wayne's like opponent for AEW Double or Nothing and do something like that. The next thing is that it was Nick Wayne versus Rhino. I saw part of the match. I didn't see all of it, but they said it lasted like 5 minutes. So that's really bad. One kill switch on Rhino is enough to take him out with Nick Wayne. That's not realistic because Rhino is a big muscular guy. He looks very good for somebody who's almost 50 years old. He doesn't look like, he's aged at all, really. So it's almost like, you have this bigger body guy and you have this guy that's known for spearing people through scaffolding and feats of strength and other things like that. So it doesn't make sense that he's losing to a guy that looks like a freshman in high school. So it just is not realistic at all, really. You should have just had him. You should have had him hit the Unprettier, the Christian Cage finisher on a steel chair to do additional damage or something like that. But it just didn't look realistic. And then what happens is Christian doesn't put the title on Nick Wayne. He just drops it to the floor, really, just to establish him being an asshole to Nick Wayne. So like I said, I think getting to Nick Wayne versus Christian Cage at AEW All In is what they need to do. And the next thing that they did was that they had Rush, and Rush is mad because what happened was there was a match, I think last week on Collision for $100,000. So Kevin Knight, he blames Kevin Knight for not winning that match. So he wants to get revenge on Kevin Knight. So I appreciate them doing something with Rush because he does have a lot of potential. But again, Rush has a very bad voice. You mess with the bull, you get the horns. I just don't like his voice. He sounds like a constipated Porky Pig, really. There's something of his voice that sounds like you can't take him serious because it's a little laughable. So I just think that he doesn't have the best voice. So he needs something to speak for him. But again, if you want LFI to be a big deal, have them challenge Shelton and Bobby Lashley and do their very bloody style. Really, they can build LFI and do something with them, but they're very underrated and they don't really have no direction. So even if you want to do Kevin Knight versus Rush at the pay-per-view, they're going to do it at Collision tonight. But yeah, there's stuff that they can do with Rush. He's not built that well. There's a lot of things they need to do with him. The next match was the next match was Mark Briscoe, Swerve Strickland, and Speedball versus Ricochet and the Young Bucks. So there's a lot of really great moves. Swerve Strickland lifting Mike Bailey to do a Hurricane Rana on Ricochet, Speedball Mike Bailey, and the Speedball Mike Bailey, Mark Briscoe, and Swerve Strickland do sink dives on each other. Ricochet does a 450 on Mike Bailey. On Mark Briscoe. Mark Briscoe on Speedball. Speedball does a running shooting star press on Matt Jackson. Speedball does a Hurricane Rana on Nick Jackson. Running Spanish Fly as well. Strickland does a double suplex on the Young Bucks. The good guys do a triple threat on Nick Jackson. And Nick Jackson pins Swerve Strickland. So I think with Mike Bailey, they're really working hard to make him a big deal. So I think the paper, you can even do Kenny Omega versus Mike Bailey. Or you can do something where you have you can set up a match between LFI and Kevin Knight and Speedball Mike Bailey, and then if they win, you can say, hey, maybe they can challenge the Hurt Syndicate, just because you want to kind of build upward momentum with them. So I think that I would do that, and it's also good because you're showing that, hey, you sign these guys, you're going to continue momentum with them. And then the other thing that I want to say is that I don't mind Swerve taking the pinfall, because I think they're trying to set up, because I know people are saying they're trying to set up Swerve and Hangman versus the Young Bucks, or you may do a Anarchy the rematch and then a Blood and Guts match where it's where you have Hangman and Swerve on a team going against the Young Bucks. So I'm okay with all of this. And part of that, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't hurt Swerve that he got pinned by one of the Young Bucks. If this happens all the time, then that wouldn't be good. But this doesn't really bury Swerve to me, and it was all right. The next thing that I would say is Jamie Hayter had an interview, and Jamie Hayter really, really sucks in the microphone. And I didn't like how she was dressed, because she wore like typical like English fashion, and also too, like, I felt like she was being like overly dramatic, or just overly just like overly emotional with this. So I think like she needs to learn that it does kind of come off as very hammed up. Really, she needs to be more of herself, and she should just should show backstage footage of Mercedes Moné just being a bitch, like being like, what, I'm entitled, or if girls have their makeup, she just knocks their makeup off and be like, I'm entitled, I get the queen's treatment, I get this thing, I get that thing. And she's kind of bullying Billy Starks and other people, or Billy Starks is like her assistant, and she throws a coffee in her face and be like, I'm the queen, I do all this stuff. Or she takes her puppet and throws that, takes Harley Cameron's puppet, throws that at Billy Starks or something like that. Like really just showing that she's an entitled bitch. And that Jamie Hayter's saying, what, I'm standing up for the women's locker room. That, what, you think you're God and whatever by having all these titles. And, what, it would be good to knock you down a peg, really. I think that would have been more dynamic. That would be a better dynamic, that would be a better dynamic, really, than they did, really, But I really think with the dialogue and everything that she said, she runs away like she owes me money. I have integrity, grit, and truth. She thinks she's untouchable, and she's walking around the second coming. And then this thing where Mercedes Moné ambushes her, and they fight in the arena area. They both fall over like a balcony, and then they do something where Jamie Hayter's like cheering to the crowd, and then she gets ambushed again by Mercedes Moné. So it's definitely really, really cringe. And I like what she said, which is that Mercedes Moné is looking through her, not at her. And that's really, really true, because, as I said, Jamie Hayter tried her best in this interview. And also think too, it was when she was being pulled around or dragged, she kind of had her hands in the air like a little cartoony. So I think she needs to be a little bit more realistic. She needs to kind of maybe think to herself okay, I'm going through this segment, I shouldn't be overacting. And I think that's her issue, is that she reminds me of Shawn Michaels versus Hulk Hogan, where the acting, her acting is a little cartoonish or a little over the top, really. So she just needs to knock it down a peg. The potential's there, but it ended up being cartoony more than digestible or not cringeworthy. So the next thing is that they had the Will Nightingale interview, and the way that Will Nightingale talks, she sounds exactly like Athena. It's she's like a poor woman's Athena, and I was a little upset with this, because what happened was she mentions that everybody has issues with the Death Rider. So what would have happened if you said, hey, she announced the Anarchy in the Arena, and she mentions that she's going to participate with the Ops and other people. So that way you have, as a difference this year, you have a woman participate in the Anarchy in the Arena. But no, they didn't do that. She's going to have another match with Chris Statlander. And I don't really want to see that, because I'm okay, well, look, you guys have multiple matches with each other. So, let's just don't turn this into Randy Orton versus John Cena, where this happens over and over and over again. Or this becomes like Conway Twitty, where you do the same thing over and over. So I'm not happy they're going to have a rematch and whatever. And also, Will Nightingale be in Anarchy in the Arena versus on the Team Op side, and then you have Marina Shafir on the Death Rider side. That would be a great dynamic, unless you do something where they kick out Marina Shafir, they put Chris Statlander in, and then they both fight each other as far as as part of the different teams and stuff like that. I think then you'd have something really great. But it's really, really unfortunate that that may not happen. They may just say, "Oh, we're going to have another rematch between the women at AEW Double or Nothing." But I think putting them in the hierarchy, the arena on different teams would be the best thing, But I hope they do that. And then you had Okada versus Kevin Knight. I was mad because Rush attacked Kevin Knight. Like, honestly, this should have been a match where they canceled, where it got canceled, because that would have been a different ending. And then also you knew that Okada was going to win, really. So I really think that it would have been better if you had Kevin Knight get beaten up by Okada. And, you had Kevin Knight, like, the match gets canceled. Okada brings him to the ring, hits a couple of finishers. Speedball comes out and says, hey, now it's going to be them for the Continental title at AEW All In. Or you do something like what I really want to see is Anthony Bowens comes out and he says, like, I want to be a champion, but one thing I can't stand is a self-righteous prick, and it's not just Max, it's you. And then you do Okada versus Anthony Bowens. I think that would be a match that should happen at AEW Double or Nothing, but I'm not sure if they're going to get to that. And then the main event was Claudio versus Samoa Joe. First of all, I'm very happy because usually they've been having a lot of Wheeler Yuta in these matches. You can't have Wheeler Yuta versus Samoa Joe because small guy versus big guy, it would hurt Samoa Joe. It would look stupid. I also appreciate when they fall in the ringside area. One thing that Samoa Joe did was that he went into the ring to break up the count, and the referee was like announcing the 10 count. Like, I think this was the first show that they had that I can remember where there was a lot of attention on keeping people in the ring, not going outside to the audience for over 10 seconds or other things. They did that a couple times here, but there was a lot of emphasis on not breaking that rule because that's just bad wrestling when you have people outside the ringside area for a couple of minutes. The referee doesn't announce, okay, it's a no DQ or whatever, because they've been doing that way too much where they violate the 10 count rule because they want to do spots. And then I was happy because the match ended at 10:05, I believe, or 10:03, because they usually end the show around 10:15 or 10:20 or sometimes 10:30. So I was really happy with this because they need to stop having overruns. You can do overruns once in a while. Like, the next overrun should be the CMLL show and then also the Blood and Guts show, but they can't be doing overruns every single episode because that is just way. Because usually when you do overrun, that's because you want something special to stand out, really. But if you do it all the time, it doesn't really work. So I was happy Joe won. And then post-match, they do a beatdown on Cesaro, like Joe and Hobbs, just to really illustrate that Joe's a legitimate threat. And I really appreciate this because that's kind of been what's been missing from the Death Riders feud, is that they need a legitimate opponent. So I'm not sure what they're going to do next week because next week is Moxley versus Joe in a steel cage match. And more than likely, Moxley's going to retain, and then we're going to get to Anarchy in the Arena, and then they're going to just Anarchy in the Arena, or we're going to get to Blood and Guts, and figure out what the main event of AEW All In is going to be. And like I said, I think it should be Anarchy in the Arena, keep the tradition alive, do Blood and Guts a little bit later. And what I would do is that 100%, what I would do is that I would set up a stipulation. If the Death Riders win, what's going to happen is that they forfeit that the World Championship goes to Joe. But if the Ops lose, the Trios titles goes to Moxley. That should be the way that they do it. Until the Death Riders back again, really. So it's almost like, they lose the championship, goes to Joe. They lose the Trios title, goes back to Moxley and the Death Riders. That should be the way to do that, to kind of raise the stakes, really. And then they should have Swerve with the Ops, and then they can also even have like Hangman and Nightingale, or they can find like Anthony Bowens or somebody else to kind of really stand with them. And that's what I would do, really. Or even have Bryan Danielson come out, just because look, this is one of their big 4 pay-per-views, Double or Nothing, and they've not built any matches outside of the Owen Hart matches. So they really just have to really elevate this, So it's a little unfortunate that they're not announcing more matches. They have Collision tonight. I doubt, if I was to bet money, I would doubt that they would announce matches. I think next week you're going to get 10 matches or 11 matches or 12 matches announced for the AEW Double or Nothing card, and people are going to say, oh, this feels like a rush job type of thing. But overall, really great show. It really flowed. I paid attention through all of it. I didn't fall asleep at all, but I would say that the downfall of the show was that there's no Double or Nothing matches, and the show is, if I'm correct, it's roughly, it's a week and a half away, really, so it's not good that they're not announcing matches. So really AEW needs to get shit together, because this is one of the big four pay-per-views. You have 6,500 people going to the event. This is a 20,000 seat arena. They're definitely lacking in treating it as the big deal as it should be.